Yes, thank y'all. Um, okay. I'm gonna just keep us moving. You know, usually we do mass call with just one person because it's enough. It's not enough space. And so we want to keep it moving because we have three beautiful brothers dedicated to struggle. And yeah, so we get started. So with the first question, actually, Uncle Jamal, you can start us off because part of the question I want to give a nod to our elders to begin for us. Usually, when we start programs locally here in Columbus, depending on what it is, we ask permission from an elder to get us started. And so, in that same respect, I would love for you to get us started with this first question. Give us some history about who you are, your history on your work on behalf of African people. But additionally, for you, Uncle Jamal, could you speak about, your journey from a young Panther, a young BLA member, to an elder who has endured prison, who has endured prison in some of the most profound ways. Um, and how has this journey changed your understanding of community and revolution? And then from
Thank you, and
Jamal.
thank you, Black Men Bill, for this mass meeting and what you're doing as Black men. Our collective strength cannot be defeated. Our collective love cannot be denied. Um, I was raised by grandparents whose older brothers and sisters and parents had been slaves. And so I heard about stories of oppression and resistance firsthand. And they didn't have a lot of formal education, but they were brilliant. In fact, they came to Harlem from the South in the 1920s, and they were Garveyites. So I heard the names Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and Marcus Garvey as I was a child growing up and was in the NAACP Youth Council. I joined the Black Panther Party in 1968 at age 15, shortly after Dr. King was assassinated. Um, and a few weeks after my 16th birthday, I was arrested as part of the New York Panther 21 case. That's the same case that Afeni Shakur was part of, Baba Daruba Ben Wahad, Baba Sundiata Akoli, Sechueo Tabor, Sister Joan Bird, and many others. Um, Released on bail right after Sister Afeni, uh, became a spokesperson for the Panther 21 for the Black Panther Party. And we had officer duties, Afeni and I, and all of the Panther 21. Um, Went back to prison. The Panther 21 was acquitted, uh, joined the BLA, went back to prison several more times for acts of resistance against state fascism. Um, my last time in prison, which was Leavenworth Federal Prison, I got great advice from an elder that was in prison that said, "Young brother, you can serve this time or you can let this time serve you." And I'll say to our incarcerated brothers who are on the call and who are listening, there's this great quote from Brother Malcolm that said that the penitentiary has been a university for many a Black man. Uh, so I was able to earn uh, several degrees in sociology and psychology from the University of Kansas. I had been part of the Black arts movement while in the Panthers and was charged by the same brother to start doing theater, formed a theater company. And this is where I became a writer, a director, poet. Um, and when I was paroled, kind of continued that journey through arts education, activism. Um, Co-founded an organization called Impact Repertory Theater, which combined arts and activism. And we say when you combine a young artist and an activist, you have an artivist. Um, uh, Started writing and directing films and documentaries, and joined the faculty of Columbia University, where I became the first Black chair in the history of the School of the Arts and the film school. And I've been on faculty there for 27 years. Always in the spirits of resistance, working on campaigns to free political prisoners and prisoners of war. Many of us in the Black Panther Party became soldiers in the Black Liberation Army. Uh, some have been liberated, some passed in prison. But I think it's that spirit of resistance um, that we have to keep in mind, and we have to recognize that we are the vanguard of that struggle. That resistance takes on many forms. Um, many of us know we grew up in the kind of households where if you got into a fight and came home crying, it might be mom, dad. Most often it was grandma to send you back to that schoolyard to punch that bully in the face. And even if you lost that fight, they would know who they were dealing with. And what the movement taught us was not only go back and punch that bully in the face, but learn some martial arts so that you could really deliver, a roundhouse kick and a shuto along with that. And then after you had beat them down, train them, let them know that this is not just for me getting my rep in that neighborhood, but train them because we are fighting the same fight. And we have to continue that spirit of resistance. We're now seeing people getting beat down by what the Trump and the neo-fascists are doing, but we call fascism by name 50, 60 years ago. We call resistance by name 50, 60 years ago. And we know with any fight, our struggle has been a continuum. It hasn't been a straight line. There are ups and downs. There are battles that you win, battles that you lose. You regroup, you learn. And I think what I've learned over these past 55 years in the struggle um, is that we organize around what we have in common. Brother Malcolm said this in Message to the Grassroots. You organize around what you have in common. The Panther 10-point program had 10 points that we could go and organize folks around. For some people, it might be, you know, uh, point number one, which was we want control of our communities, or we want full employment for our people. We had a point in about housing. We had a point in about healthcare. You start to meet people at the point of their will and organizing. Police brutality was point number seven in the Black Panther 10-point program. We want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of Black people. And for brothers that were on the corner coming out the street, people getting beat down, that's the point that you organize. So I think our greatest lesson of organization is uh, think long. We're dealing with fascists who are executing a plan that they began 50 years ago when they saw us mobilizing, when they saw us raise up in resistance. So we have to think long. We have to think of the short-term battles. And instead of arguing about the 10 things that we disagree on, let's organize around the three things that we do agree on. And in the spirit of the movement, you ask any Panther veteran, I'll stop at this point, what were we taught to believe above all other things? And yes, it was the 26 10-point program, 26 rules of discipline. And we studied, Malcolm and Che Guevara and Kwame Nkrumah and Frantz Fanon and had Mao's Red Book. But I guarantee any Panther veteran answers this question the same way. We were taught to have an undying love for the people and to serve the people, mind, body, and soul. And
Indeed.
with that love, that revolutionary love guiding us, and that idea that we organize people around not just ideas, but around needs. The concept of freedom is is abstract to someone whose stomach is growling because they haven't eaten. Concept of liberation is a little bit abstract to a person that's unhoused or in poor housing and that needs a
Mm-hmm.
safe, warm, dry place to sleep. The concept of revolution is abstract to someone who's getting inadequate medical care. But if you organize around those points and you use that to politically educate and unify in the spirit of love, you're the person that keeps coming back, like that person in the schoolyard. I came back, until I could fend you off with a punch. And then I came back and beat you with the martial arts. And then I picked you up and started to teach you what I know around
Mm-hmm.
karate and then took you home to my grandmother's house to feed you. That's the true path of the real revolutionary organizer and the real African warrior.
Indeed, I say to that. Thank you, brother Jamal. Last night we closed out our study on revolutionary suicide, Huey P. Newton's autobiography, and one of the things we lifted up was this sense of this deep love for the people. This deep revolutionary love is a major theme of the not just the text, but the party itself. And we asked the question, right? What does that mean for us today, right? How do we build that level of trust with the people that we in our neighborhoods that we serve, right? Are we defending them? Are we providing for them? Are we providing for ourselves and our members? And so that lesson is right on point. Um, Brother Two Black, Dick, if you could, um, yeah, if you could, hold on, let me do this real quick. Let me move the spotlight. Yeah, if you could answer the question, right? Share a little bit about yourself, and the work that you do on behalf of the people.
Peace, peace, peace. Admittedly, the sharing about myself was always my least favorite part, but we'll make it work. But thanks for having me here. Shout out to my co-panelists. I hope to meet y'all, in person someday. But I'm happy to be here. I got the name Too Black from from performing poetry, writing poetry. It actually Brother Jamal referenced the Malcolm X grassroots speech. That's actually what inspired it. When Malcolm X talks about you have coffee, and when it's too black, they put cream in it. They try to water it down. They try to integrate it. They try to take away its potency. So, as an artist, that was how I wanted to define my art. Something that can't be watered down, something that can't be integrated, something that cannot be softened. Right. That was the idea when I came up with the name Too Black. I was like 19, 20 years old, so I was much younger at that time. Um, I've evolved. I'm not going to get my whole bio here, but I evolved to understand, art is can't just be something that makes people think, but it has to be something that inspires people to act. And I think that's a trap that a lot of artists fall into, is where we want to just inspire people, we want to raise consciousness, but if your art is not moving people towards action, it's useful, but it's not maybe reaching its full potential. And so I've still practiced art, obviously, as a poet, as a filmmaker, as a writer, but I find those things to be extensions of work that I'm attempting to do, and work that I'm attempting to help my people with, not something that's just hoping that somebody catches it and goes or runs with it, but I have no real attachment to it, right? So the stage in and of itself is not a side of struggle, think, for me, like it once was. Even if it is a side of struggle, it's not the main site. Like, what happens once we hear the word, once we hear the message, what do we do? Right? You can't get involved in everything, but what can you commit yourself to? So I'm based here out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And I think the thing that I've committed myself to currently, primarily, involved in different formations, but the thing I'm here for today is the struggle for the Pendleton Two. That's two political prisoners here in Indiana by the name of John Balagoon Cole and Christopher Naim Trotter. There was an uprising at Pendleton Correctional Facility in 1985, February 1st. It started by there being a fellow prisoner who was one of their comrades, by the name of Lincoln Love. He was being targeted by the guards. They went around his cell, they tear gassed him, they handcuffed him, and then they beat him damn near to death. And then they dragged him out of his cell, and they told the other prisoners that they would be next. But these were organized prisoners. They were actually had an organization at the time called Black Dragons. And they got word out because he was in the what's called the MRU, maximum restraint unit. They got word down to the down to population about what was happening, and they're like, "Yo, they trying to kill us in here." These two brothers, Naeem and Balagoon, along with other prisoners, went to see. I'm giving y'all the short version of the story, but they went to see what was going on. They originally did not approach with any kind of violence or anything of that nature. They were just trying to check to see what was going on with their brother. And when they tried to check, the guards attacked them. This broke out into a melee, and now the guards were no longer just about to kill this prisoner, but they were going to kill, them and the guards and the prisoners that came with them. So now they had to defend themselves. So they're being chased throughout the prison. They're trying to get guards to shoot them. They're being chased on trucks, things of that nature, and eventually they're still trying to find their brother because he was not where they went to find him. So Lincoln Love is not there. So they're still trying to find him as they're being chased. As they're attempting to find him, the guards corral them in an area that's outside of what was called Cell House J. They had to fight their way out with stabs and knives, but it was all self-defense, and they took several hostages. They took over the prison, that cell house in particular, for about 15 hours. They had to protect those hostages because they understood that they did not, this could lead to even further slaughter. They had a series of demands to improve the conditions of the prison, and nobody was killed in this incident. Eventually, they released the hostages. Their fellow prisoner was saved. He was not killed on that day. And one of their demands was supposed to be there would be no repercussions or reprimand following this, but that's not what happened. So they went to trial, and it was an all white jury, and they ended up receiving over 200 plus years for this incident. They're still locked up to this day. On top of that, we learned that the guards were a part of a group called the Sons of Light, and that was a Ku Klux Klan splinter group. So the
Uh-huh.
guards belonged to the KKK, particularly the guards that beat up Lincoln Love on that day. Only one of them, I think, went to prison for violating civil rights. Nothing else happened to any of them. Yet these two brothers got 200 plus years. One got 142 years. The other one got 84 years. And then on top of that, Balagoon spent 32 years in solitary, and Naeem spent 20 years in solitary. So this is a story here in Indiana that really was not very well known. I heard about it, I think, at a rally I went to back in 2021. And upon doing that, I have a podcast. So we brought them on initially on the Black Myths podcast to talk about their story. And then me and some comrades here, we formed a defense committee. And since then, we've been working towards their freedom. So to bring it back to the art aspect, we produced a documentary film. It's an award-winning film called The Pendleton Two. They Stood Up. Did this really with no budget or no access to inside the prison, so we had to get very creative in terms of making it. And that's a film that came out of committee work as opposed to just doing it as an artist, hoping somebody would hear it and then go do the work that we didn't want to do. So we use this work as a means of recruitment. We use this work obviously as a means of raising awareness. We use this work to recruit legal help, and we've been successful in doing all those things. So they're still locked up to this day, and when we can get more into it. So we always ask people for their support, whether that's through donations, signing petitions, or even if you want to join the committee, or if you have any other legal help or any assistance that you can offer. And you can always find that at pendleton2.com. That is Pendleton, the number 2.com. If you type in the word, it will not pop up. So that's what I'm here for today. I could speak about other work, but I think that's what I want to highlight. So free to Pendleton too.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, we definitely have some questions, particularly, after Brother Kinetik goes to introduce himself and share a bit about his story and his commitment to African people, um, about political prisoner campaigns, and just to hear more detail about that particular campaign itself. So thank you, Brother Too Black. Yeah, Brother Kinetik, if you can share a bit about yourself, and yeah, the way you've been organizing our people for a very long time.
You on mute, brother, if you talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I had been
We can't hear you anymore. You gotta unmute. There it
okay.
is.
You hear me now?
Yep.
All right, peace and blessings. I'm Brother Kinetic Justice from Alabama. Um, my story is a long one, but it's a common one. It's not something that's unheard of. In a predominantly white city in Alabama, I was railroaded into prison for the death of a white National Guardsman, and in prison with a role at the age of 20. And my lesson was that on my very first, I ran into a brother that was a part of the IFA formation from the 70s. And this brother gave me the book of Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, and the revolutionary work by Bob Avakian. when I was 20 years old, um, doing my 90 days in solitary confinement to see if I could adjust to a life without parole sentence. After 90 days in solitary confinement, I was sent to one of the most infamous prisons in Alabama at the time, which was Holman Correctional Facility. And a part of the predestination it was, I was placed beside Mr. Mafundi Lake, who was a Black Panther organizer here in the state of Alabama throughout the 60s and 70s and had been railroaded into the prison system. I was educated by Mr. Mafundi on, the politics of being African in a white country. And I was a youngster and didn't really embrace a lot of it in depth. But over the years, the next coming years, I was paired up with a lot of other brothers who were conscious, who had the best interests of Black people forefront. And they took me under their wing and they trained me in law. They trained me in politics. They trained me in economics. And we began a law class at Holman. They called it a law class because the foundation of it was the principles of law. But it was really a rites of passage group that we had that was called Halifax County. Mr. James McConaughey, who is a legend in the state of Alabama when it comes to litigation and law, he took out his time and he educated and trained us on what we would need to know in order to fight this battle against this corrupt system in Alabama. So in the early 2000s, me and my comrades, we began organizing ourselves within the prison and educating other prisoners. And we created the Black Affairs Committee. And up under the Black Affairs Committee, we taught the knowledge of self to young Black brothers coming into the prison system. And we helped educate a lot of brothers throughout the system. And through this educating of brothers and doing the legal work and giving legal assistance to other brothers, we developed a reputation throughout the state as, certified stand-up brothers who really wanted what they wanted for themselves. And this respect turned into an influence that later on came into the picture that when we began to study the system, we understood that it wasn't about crime punishment. It wasn't about truth and justice. It was about the economics. It was about maintaining cash cow. Through research, we began to understand that this prison system was a continuation of the slave system that turned into convict leasing, that turned into all the different names that they called it. But it was actually the same thing. It was the same free labor slave system. So we began educating not just ourselves, but brothers throughout the system and family members of people to bring up the consciousness of what was really going on within the Alabama prison system. And we had, like I said, we had brothers who had struggled from the 1970s, the Admiral Holman brothers who struggled. And, at the time that things were going on in Attica and that situation was going on, there was an identical situation going on in Alabama from Holman and Fountain, what they call the Atmore brothers, where several IFA members were, killed in the process of taking the prison over and had an officer as hostage. And one of the officers died in the course of that, and a lot of those brothers were killed. But that lesson remained alive in a lot of those brothers because in the late 70s, they were shipped to the federal prison system and into segregation. And throughout the 80s, a lot of these brothers weren't in the Alabama prison system. They were in the federal prison system or in a solitary confinement cell. But when I came to prison in the early 90s, they were just getting out of SIG after a decade or so in the cell. And those lessons from the 70s were passed on to us and continued on. And eventually we created a simulation of IFA with the Free Alabama movement. And we began organizing around our labor. And we began to educate brothers about, our labor was our power throughout prison because in Alabama, we understand that the European, the Caucasian in Alabama only respects two things, bloodshed and money. And we had shed enough blood without, having any win or so forth. So we began to understand that we control all their money. Through our free labor, we were generating millions and millions of dollars that was in turn being used to keep us incarcerated. And that seemed backwards to us. So we began to educate people around our labor that if we withheld our labor, then we took the money off the table for the DOC, and we had leverage and power in order to negotiate the issues of, better treatment, changing of the laws, changing of the Habitual Offender Act, the parole board. We understood that our issues couldn't just be something to be complained about and talked about, and we had to put those with action. And that action was called work strikes, which we were taught by brothers from IFA to understand that, you leverage, your labor for the changes we need. So we codified that concept into our format and our program for change. We began to conduct work strikes through multiple maximum security prisons at the beginning. And then while I was in segregation, because after we initiated these work strikes and organized these brothers from multiple prisons, I was placed in the solitary confinement for 5 years. But as a part of that, I created a blog talk radio show that we use to educate prisoners throughout the state as well as family members. And this blog talk radio show caught on to different states, and brothers from Georgia and brothers from South Carolina, they had formations that, were also struggling from the inside. So, we linked up with UNAM, which was a United Nations Against the Machine group out of Georgia, and Jailhouse Lawyer Speaks out of South Carolina. And in this process, I met Brother Sadiq Hassan, part of the Lucasville group, the brothers that was on death row for the uprising in Lucasville in the early 90s. And me and Brother Hassan spoke on a daily basis about, organizing something outside of the state of Alabama. And together with the IWW, we created a group called IWOC, which was the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. And through this vehicle, me, Brother Hassan, and the brothers out of Georgia, and we linked up with a brother out of California who was at New Folsom, Brother Ivan Kilgore. And through these contacts and communications, we were able to distribute newsletters and information across the country about what we had going on in Alabama and the methods we were using to effectuate change. And a lot of brothers grasped the concept. And as a result of that, we led what was the first national prison strike in the United States, with over 60 prisons who joined into this strike against this system of corruption. And that format has been duplicated a few times, by the brothers in South Carolina, the brothers in Texas, and the brothers in California. So, the struggle has been, real and raw and in the trenches for us. And, but the foundation of it was, and I think what Brother Jamal just said earlier, and I think about, the love that Mr. Mufandi, instilled in us for Black people, and understanding that Black people were, the foundation of all that it was. And, through our education of understanding our history before coming to America, understanding the struggles of what went on the continent, and learning, that history and not the watered down history of our history began at slavery. So, our struggle for freedom, justice, and equality and the liberation of African people has been Pan-African and Black nationalist from the beginning. And, we try to keep it on that core and on those principles that, God, family, love, and the law. And the law is to love your kind. And, that's what we, have been promoting and, what we've been working towards for, like I said, over 50 years, with the continuation of the brothers from IFA up to the FAM and the Alabama resistance movement and other formations that had developed throughout the Alabama prison system. But, we just, trying to keep it moving because the struggle ain't over here. We seeing a lot of backlash. We seeing the roll back to where, the same playbook, the things that happened in the 60s when brothers became conscious in society and black power became a thing, our communities got flooded with heroin and everybody went to sleep. And in the prison system, we had organized and became so militant and so organized with our point that, as a result of that, these prisons got flooded with blocker and fentanyl and all these synthetic drugs to try to put these brothers back to sleep. So one of our main struggles in Alabama is, fighting for the minds of our youth, fighting for the minds of these brothers who been poisoned through this chemical warfare that we got going on in Alabama, because that's one of our major obstacles in Alabama now. We're under attack with chemical warfare by this administration. So that's just a little bit, about, how we came to this point and what our mission is to keep going forward. Because, like I said, the struggle is not over for us in Alabama. It's not even looking like it's over. So we having to double down and, continue to educate, continue to push and promote, continue to agitate. And, it's each one teach one. I want for my brother what I want for myself. And that's the message that we promote.
Thank you,
Thank
brother
you.
Kinetik Justice. Real quick, Asa, thank you for all of that. On Sunday, me and my comrades, we did a program for Black August for the community. And we were actually were able to be in conversation with Iman Sadiq Hassan for about an hour. So the fact that you just brought him up feels very divine in this moment for me. So thank you, brother. I'll pass it to you, Asa.
Yeah. So I just asked folks to drop some nines in the chat, drop some love in the chat for brother Kinetik, brother Michael Clancy, right? Brother Two Black, Baba Jamal Joseph, and the work that they've been doing and the work that they are currently doing. The last question, and then we can take this wherever y'all want it to, is around art, and art as a way to fight for the minds of our people, right? To be able to move them towards a sharper revolutionary consciousness, a sharper consciousness period. We talked a lot about Ubuntu yesterday at the ending of our study group for revolutionary suicide, and the importance of that. Ubuntu means I am because we are. And Ubuntu not being this thing that is just like selflessness, but it means I believe Brother Kundayo said it speaks to more of a deep togetherness, right? It's not just that I'm going to give everything of myself to everybody else at the detriment of myself, because if I do that, it's I am because we are, not I am because I am, right? So I have to make sure that I'm healthy for the collective, and the collective has to make sure that I'm also healthy, right? So it's a give and take, it's a back and forth, it's a dialectical. And it's just very important that we understand those things. So if we want our folks to understand these concepts, these new ways of life, well, not new ways, but these different ways of life than we see here in the United States, then we have to fight for their minds. One of the ways that we do that is art. Currently, Kinetik, you all have a documentary that's coming out, The Alabama Solution. We actually was just able to get in touch with folks, and we're going to be able to screen that in a couple of our different hubs. Two Black, y'all have Pendleton too. We actually tomorrow, Friday, are going to screen that in Broward County. And Baba Jamal Joseph, you also make documentaries and do all types of art. So I just want to generally ask, what is the importance of art when it comes to the revolutionary movements and our liberation of our people? And I appreciate how Two Black you kept saying that your work around the documentary came out of committee work, right? And it's deeply tied in to the work and to the action of moving forward a program for our people. It's not just art for art's sake. So want to ask y'all, so Two Black about Pendleton 2, Kinetik about Alabama, the Alabama Solution, and then Baba Jamal Joseph about art and its place in our movements. And we can start from you, Baba, Elder Jamal Joseph.
So I want to take it back to, you know, we know that during slavery that we would fashion drums. There were griots who were storytellers that remembered how to make the drum, and those drums would carry through the night, even on the plantations and the slave quarters. We know about the gospel songs. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot was code for the Underground Railroad, coming for to carry me home. And there would be codes about where to meet. So we knew how to use art in a way to keep spirit alive, to keep faith alive. Um, you know, in the midst of the brutal Holocaust, the African Holocaust, we were able to bring those traditions with us, to bring the Orishas with us, to kind of combine that with faith. So it's always been a revolutionary weapon, a weapon of empowerment and of spirit. Um, my work in documentary, but also in narrative film, and currently working on a Black Panther Legacy project where I'm getting the stories of Panther veterans and not just their time in the Black Panther Party, but you know from when they were children growing older. For example, Baba Sundiata, his story. People uh, probably don't know that uh, when he grew up in Texas, he was in the sharecropping fields with his mama picking cotton at 4, but that he went to college to Prairie University and was a math major and was a NASA engineer, was Neil Armstrong's math tutor, all before he joined, the Black Panther Party, where in the Harlem branch he was a treasurer. So these are interesting and fascinating stories. When I worked on Dear Mama a few years ago, the saga of Afeni Shakur and Tupac Shakur, uh, the 3 producers at the helm, Nelson George, Alan Hughes, and myself, and Brother Alan, who directed it, said, this is going to be like the Trojan horse in mythology, where we'll use Tupac to get into people's living room and their devices, and then open the door and show them America. Tell the true story of him, that the story was truly told because Tupac was a Panther Cub, one of the first Panther Cubs, and raised a revolutionary. And that journey and what Afeni Shakur went through as a Black woman who we know famously defended herself in the Panther 21 trial while pregnant with Tupac, went through her struggles with post-traumatic stress and with drug addiction, and emerged from that victorious to become not only a great mother to Tupac Shakur, but a mother to the movement. And in the 20 years that she had beyond Tupac's, becoming an ancestor, what that meant. So that kind of work is important uh, in terms of what we do with films, what we do with theater, what we do with music, to celebrate that. Sometimes it's straight up, like Dead Prez, calling for revolution. Sometimes it's coded messages about love and struggle. It's the iconography of the images of African warriors and African cultures all the way through resistance and the Panther Party. It's important to do this. And to educate and to understand that through film and television and books and art and social media, that we're planting their seeds. I like to share this story. When I came home from prison 30 some odd years ago, one of my first jobs was working in a program where it was funded. It was called Changing Scenes, and young brothers who were on probation, they were getting GED, high school equivalency diploma trainings, how to do a resume, and they wanted to do a cultural component. So they said, maybe you can do a little theater component. And I was excited about this. I was built for this. I was only a few months out of prison where I had, started a theater company. I had this idea of, I teach a little acting, a little writing. We create a simple 1-act play. At the end of the cycle, we do a play and their families would come. It only took me 15 minutes in my first workshop to believe I needed to throw my curriculum out the window. These brothers were in gangs, they were beefing, some had beef among themselves. Some was talking about when they left, they were going to go pick up the gat from someone and go, handle some business up in the Bronx, wherever the beef was. So I started doing a circle, and then we would do a cipher where people would kind of check in. And then based on whatever the check-in was, that was the curriculum for the day. It's the one job that I thought that I did not succeed at. And I like to tell this story, in addition, and especially in comparison to, what I've been blessed to accomplish. The job that I thought that I failed at, because we never did the play. I never realized the curriculum. Fast forward about 10 years, I'm walking down Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard with my oldest son. There's a brother about to get into a taxi. He sees me and he stops and he goes, Mr. Joseph, Brother Jamal, you don't remember me, but I was one of the knuckleheads in this program called Changing Scenes. And, I defaulted to, no, you weren't a knucklehead. He says, no, I was a knucklehead. And every week you would come with something positive, and I was not trying to hear it. But 2 years later, it kicked in. And I'm so glad that I'm seeing you now. I'm a college graduate now. I'm a husband now. I'm a social worker now. Thank you. So part of the of work, a large part of it, is the work that we're doing for the films that we don't know if people are seeing, or the books that we're writing, or the poetry, or the different events. But they become like seeds in the garden. You know how you're planting, a wind comes along and blows a seed, then you're someplace in the oddest place and you see that similar flower growing. Or as Pac said, a rose that grew from concrete. That's your seed and that's your work. So I think we have to give ourselves like the griot did, be that storyteller that's the truth teller, that knows that we have the responsibility of the history of the tribe, of the current events, and the prophecies that's going to happen 7 generations ahead in that creative work. And to involve young people as soon as we can in the co-creative process and impact in the youth program, as my niece Candace knows, the young people we would teach certain skills, but they create their own stories. And so it was poetry and music and hip hop and dance so that they could kind of reach their peers. So I think that's the job of the Griot Warriors. And just quickly, I just want to say ashe to Baba Mufundi, uh, who I knew, who was a great organizer and Panther veteran, and just libation. I see Sister DeQuee is here. So to Baba Sekou and Baba Bilal Sunni Ali, talk about a great revolutionary artist, Bilal Sunni Ali and the Midnight Band and what he did as a composer and artist and activist. I just have to pour libation and shout them out, and my comrades Anaje and Shep, who are also on the call. But that's what we do. We have to be those griots, create that art, disseminate it far and wide, do it collectively. As you were speaking about before, too, Black, to involve to involve as many people as I can and tell those stories in multiple ways and on multiple levels.
Thank you, Baba Jamal. Thank you. Can we go to Kinetik and then we'll go to YouTube like?
I'm a strong believer in, that we have to own our own narrative, and that's been a thing in the past where, someone has always told our story for us or tried to tell our story for us. So I think it's extremely important for us to really understand the nature of African people, that, we rhythmic people, we music through sound, through drums and things, that we get in tune with one another and we pass on messages and so forth. And using messages, using music, and using documentaries and films to own our narrative and to tell our story from our perspective and to give it the reality that, the people need. And I think that music, film, and all different kinds of art are one of the most powerful ways to pass on messages. You know, it has been very informative for me, you know, listening to Tupac, listening to Dead Prez, or listening to the X Clan and the old BDP from back in the days. Those were very informative for me. You know what I'm saying? Being able to have these brothers to tell me my history, to tell me the struggle through music. So, you know, owning our narrative is essential, you know, through paintings, through poetry, through song, through dance, and every means available. I think that we should invest a lot more into, you know, passing the message and teaching our elders and our youth to bridge the gap through art, through music, and those means.
Thank you, Kinetik. Can you tell us a little bit about the Alabama solution? When it could come out, what's the process for it, and your thoughts about it, and what you're hoping that it can do?
Well, actually, HBO notified us last week that October 3rd it goes to theaters in New York and in California, and on October the 10th, it's released on HBO Max. Immediately after that, we're doing free screenings throughout the state of Alabama. You know, multiple screenings. But the Alabama solution, as I tell people that, you know, the last 10 years, um, of our struggle in Alabama was documented through videos. You know, we documented the conditions throughout these prisons. We did interviews with hundreds of brothers throughout the system of how they got here and their struggles. Um, we documented officer abuses and, you know, the entire plethora of everything in prison that, you know, we documented on our YouTube channel, through social media, and running into these producers, Charlotte Kaufman and Andrew Jarecki. You know, they took a direct interest in the struggle that we had going on, and they, in a beautiful way, took the last 10 years of our work and our struggle, and they put it into a narrative form that people could comprehend and understand, to get to the essence of, you know, some of the things that I was speaking about earlier, making the connection of the slave empire with, you know, the Department of Corrections and the change of names. And it's one of the most powerful lessons that people in Alabama will learn, because a lot of people didn't know that a lot of this stuff was going on in their name. And now this is going to be a platform where, you know, it's not just coming from me, it's not just coming from my comrades and so forth. You know, this is cinematic, where art has been used to take our story and to put it on a platform where the world can see what's actually going on in Alabama. And I think it's, you know, we engaged in this project with these producers beginning in 2019, where we began, you know, walking with them on a daily basis, educating them about what our struggle was, you know, documenting things and explaining things. Um, so, you know, the Alabama solution is really, in essence, is an accumulation of 50 years of struggle from IFA in the 70s to the Free Alabama movement of 2014 and on up. And they did a wonderful job of grabbing, you know, the essence and heart of our story and our struggle and put it on the screen for people to see. So I'm excited, you know, um, for people to actually get a firsthand account to what we have actually been living through and what we have actually been struggling against. And it seems from the previews that, you know, we've given, because we did the Sundance Film Festival in January, and I spoke to an audience of maybe 100 people at the Sundance Film Festival screening. And then we went to California and had a screening in California where I spoke to a group of people. And, you know, we went to DC and New York and Atlanta and these different places to just get a feel. And we received, you know what I'm saying, rave reviews and interest all across the country where we've screened the film, that, you know, this is not just the Alabama problem. This is systematic. You know, this system of mass incarceration, you know, Alabama is just a place that you get the raw, uncut essence of all of the atrocities that people across the country are suffering. But it's a systematic dehumanization that we're experiencing all across the country. in these prison camps, in these slave camps. So, I'm hoping and believing that from the Alabama solution that a lot of eyes will be open and a whole lot of more people will take up the torch and stand on the front lines about bringing not just reform, but we need to revolutionize the way that people see incarceration and the way that people see crime and punishment in America. Because what we're experiencing here is nothing but a slave master and a slave setup. Call it what you want to call them, officers, and call us prisoners, or call them correctional and call us inmates. It's the same dynamic that they've always had. And I tell people that one of the most genius things about Europeans is they have learned to change the name of something without changing the actual function of it. They great at changing the names of things, but nothing changes about the essence of the fundamentals of this. And I think that the film captures that. And I'm hoping that, like I said, I'm hoping that people across the country will open their eyes and wake up and take their position on the front lines and help us to dismantle this system once and for all completely.
Thank you, brother Kinetik. Thank you. Too bad.
You mind repeating the question? Just so
Just tell us more about Pendleton 2 and the importance of art in moving forward revolutionary work.
yeah. Yeah, I think for one, I'll say this is an aside, then I'll answer the question more directly. I do think sometimes, and this is not this panel, but I think this happens in other cases. Sometimes here recently, art and activism has kind of become co-opted to mean nothing, and it becomes a situation where people realize it's more trendy to do that, and they'll take art to push their own agenda, to push their career, to benefit off of it, because I think the people are craving for more serious, relevant art that's not escapist and things of that nature. So I want to say I appreciate being on this panel first, just because that's not what's happening here. But with that being said, I think that's the ground kind of what we do with the Pendleton too is coming out of the arts, particularly here locally in Indianapolis, and that's primarily what I did for a very long time. Um, I remember one time I won't get deep into this, but it was a situation that happened here locally. There was some money being thrown around. It's some white guilt money, basically. And one of the I talked to one of the artists and who was involved, and he was like, basically, we just need to position ourselves so we can get the white guilt money. And I asked him, I was like, is that the point of all of this? Like, is that what we're trying to do? And he was like, basically, yeah. Like he actually just admitted that to me off the record, right? So a lot of this sometimes when you're doing this work, you have to pick a subject matter and you have to position your art in a way that hopefully can communicate to the people that we're not just kind of like lining ourselves up for the windfall of white guilt money. We're not just lining ourselves up to exploit the victimization of our people and things of that nature. And I think that I just want to point that distinction out. So doing the Pendleton 2 film, like I said earlier, came out of committee work. And we always have to point that out because sometimes even when we show the film to audiences, small or large, people, they start crying, which is fine, or people get very sad and they start asking us about how we feel, which is not really important because we're not the ones in prison. Um, but we always have to resituate it to, be like, well, the menu just listen to, because our film situates the two prisoners primarily. It doesn't have a bunch of lawyers and judges talking for them and academics and things of that nature. But the men you just saw are still, they're still sharp. They're still fighting. They still are convicted in what they did, and they feel like what they did was the right thing to do. I was talking to Naeem just the other day, and he's like, "I'm free regardless, whether I get out of here or not." Right. So when you do art, you have to, sometimes, particularly in this context, you have to fight against that tendency where people just want it to be a kind of form of catharsis, right? Like it's just like, oh, I just got to feel something, and you have to remind people, like, one, these are people who are still in prison. This isn't something that happened a long time ago. Two, there are things that could be done, And if these men were willing to sacrifice much more than most of us will, then we can at least, the least we can do is make a film about it. The least we can do is form a committee. The least we can do is organize around this story, right? Because it just, like we start out the film, my co-director King Trill, he uses George Floyd. I saw somebody put George Floyd money in the chat, but he uses George Floyd as an example to kind of draw a contrast. And he talks about how when George Floyd was killed, people filmed it, but everybody was just standing around and nobody actually intervened to stop George Floyd from being killed. And then we respond to it after the fact, right? And he was comparing that to the Pendleton 2 to say, they saw a man being beaten and they stepped in. And this wasn't to criticize people individually to say what you should have done, but just more so to demonstrate, as we try to line up in the film, the culture that these men had in prison. Like I had mentioned, they were in an organization called the Black Dragons. It was a self-defense organization. It taught political education. It provided mutual aid. So when someone was being killed, they had formed the bonds and they had the community that was ready to respond to something like this, right? The community on the outside often we're not organized in that sense. We're individualized. So we think the most thing we can do, if anything, is to film something, let alone we're not going to throw a brick. We're not going to step in. We're not going to create a distraction. Like we haven't been really organized around doing that. So art has to be transformed from something that's just a spectacle where people basically sometimes people treat art like they treated George Floyd, like we just stand around and we watch and we witness it and then we tell somebody that we witnessed it, right? But art should be something that should actually make you want to intervene and throw the brick, right? Something that should make you want to intervene and create the distraction, something that should make you want to intervene and do something out. That's the kind of art that if we're talking about revolutionary art, that's the kind of art that we like to produce, right? So but often people are, you know, I guess in some ways brainwashed or just have been influenced by the kind of broader culture to just treat these things as spectacle, even if the thing on the screen is the most quote unquote revolutionary thing they've ever seen. It's just something I watch and I move on. Now, obviously, you can't act on everything you see. Obviously, you can't commit yourself to literally everything. There's a lot of things happening in this world. I totally understand that. But at some point, you would like to believe art can incentivize people to want to commit themselves to something else. And so it's something my elder in Black Alliance for Peace, Rafiki Morris said. He said, culture is a way of life. Culture is the things that we do on a day-to-day. Culture is how we relate to each other, etc. He's like, the cultural products are the art. And we often get caught up thinking that the culture is the cultural products. And when you get caught up on the cultural products, you kind of fetishize them and you don't think about the actual way of life that we need to be living on a day to day. So when we come back to the Pendleton 2, we're living a way of life with other prisoners in this organization of Black Dragons where you act. You don't watch your brother get beaten down. You don't watch Klansmen do that to them. Like you do something, right? Because you've been educated and those are the things that are inside of you. So I think art has to be able to reflect back to the actual culture itself, as opposed to thinking that art itself is the culture or the play or the film or things of that nature. Like we're trying to push the culture to actually think about it and act on things in that way. And I think that's been the work of our committee is we're like, we always pointed out that this is a film to organize around. So like, for instance, we just recently were able to get a lawyer to commit pro bono to our case because he saw the film. Like that's more important to me than a standing ovation or people crying. It's not that that stuff doesn't matter. I appreciate, any love we get, but I'm just saying like, that's the mentality I think you have to take if you're doing this as a form of work for your people, as opposed to just attention or just hopefully you can inspire somebody else to do something. Like sometimes that's the best you can do. And as a poet, I've written plenty of poems where that's the best I can do. So I'm not knocking that, but I used to feel at some point there needs to be some poem or something that I'm going to commit myself to in a way, the subject matter of it, in which it has to be more than just like a kind of generic vibe or inspiration. Like we have to actually commit ourselves to things. And art, I believe, at its core, should be able to inspire people to be committed to the struggle for their people.
Go ahead, brother. Elder. Go ahead, Elder Jamal.
Um, one of the greatest lessons I learned about organizing was from Sister Fanny, where we're walking through Harlem one day, and she said the goal of the Black Panther Party is not to have every man, woman, and child in the community become Panthers. Um, our job is to teach people the possibility of struggle through example and raise consciousness. And if we do our job, then we won't need a Black Panther Party. So an activist goal should be to win, right? To kind of put ourselves out of business, so to speak, because the people are liberated. And so with the artists, if we can create pathways of imagination and possibilities, so that people come away inspired and understand we don't necessarily need you to leave school, leave your job, uh, but to do what you do with a revolutionary consciousness. So one of the things we would say is let the bakers bake, let the teachers teach, let the healers heal, let the builders build, uh, but let them do it with a revolutionary consciousness. And so if we think back, it's amazing, right? If you think back being in an emergency room, and nobody's seeing you, and here comes this sister, here comes this nurse, you know, that moves you to the front of the line, that understands what's going on. And then you realize she's got some consciousness, some activism. And so if we plant those seeds and we don't do it in saying that, okay, now that you've read this, now that you've seen this, now that you've heard this music, you have to go out and struggle exactly in that way. We have to build, a broad base in that way. Uh, in prison, when I was on Rikers Island, uh, there was a brother named Arno who was a guard and a brother named Abdul Kareem who was a correction officer. They made it a point to stop young brothers and ask them what they had read. And then they would smuggle books. We hear these stories, especially, in the county jails in Rikers Island about the guards who were smuggling in drugs and alcohol and all those things. These brothers risked their jobs. Brother Kareem had been in the Nation of Islam and the Organization of African American Unity. They'd risked their jobs smuggling in books, and then said, after you read it, pass it around. So even in the camp, we had those people who understood the importance of culture and art of smuggling in books. And I think if we approach the art in that way as an organizing tool, and whatever messages is in the film or we talk about it in the Q&A, organize. If you can come out to these rallies and get on the front lines to fight for political prisoners, great. But if not, go back to that bakery and bake. Go back to that construction site and build. Go back to that clinic and heal. Go back to that classroom and teach, but do it with a revolutionary consciousness and revolutionary love. And that's part of the inspiration that we can see. I go back to the example of the seed that blows and you don't know exactly where it lands and where it's going to grow, but that's our job as activists in revolutionary art.
Man, um, thank y'all. Kicking it to you, Dio.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all. I got so many more questions that we wrote out, and I know we getting really close to time, and we're really at time, but I want to ask this last question, and just to close us out. Again, it's 9:30, so I know we at that time. um, but again, this has been such a beautiful conversation. The last question I do want to ask, and again, because of time, try to make it as succinct as possible. You know, the prison movement has always been a deep relationship between people on the inside and the outside, right? This conversation is evident of that. Um, so, from your perspective, what does effective and meaningful solidarity, right, for folks on the outside look like, right? So, brother Kinetik Justice, the work you're doing, Too Black, with the Pendleton 2 and possibly other political prisoner work. Obviously, brother Baba Jamal, from your experience then and now, right? What is the role of of freedom fighters on the outside, activists on the outside, or folks who are new to struggle in any kind of way, right? What is the role that we should be playing, right? As it relates to freeing political prisoners, politicized prisoners, prisoners of war. What is our role? And we can start with actually, yeah, we'll start with Brother Two Black for that question, and then we'll go Brother Kinetik Justice, and then we'll end with our Elder Jamal.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily one role. I think to the point, like for instance, even how I ended up doing the film, I just kind of randomly so happened to have a degree in, video production, so I have a pretty good skill set when it comes to editing. So it was what I was able to, that was the skill sets I was able to offer to the, one of the skill sets I was able to offer to the campaign. um I think some people can't do that. Then there's things that I can't do that other people can do, right? Some people are really good at, you know, just bringing people together. Some people are very inspirational. Like there's just different things that people can do. So there's not, I don't think necessarily one role. Like if we're thinking about on an individual level, I think that can vary depending on what your skill set is, what your kind of general makeup is, what stage of development you are at as a human being, et cetera, et cetera. But I think for us, and I think in general, one, the barrier of like the inside outside needs to be broken as much as possible. I mean, even when you're trying to keep somebody alive in prison, the best thing is outside contact, is giving them some kind of inspiration from the outside. Sometimes, so one of the things we offer to people, for instance, is just to write the Pendleton to, just to write them. So even if you can't join the committee, whatever your schedule is, like if you can write them a letter, they will appreciate that, and you can build bonds with them. Because often when you talk to them, at least in our case, they don't even really want to talk about their case. I mean, they probably get tired of talking about their case. They've been in prison for 40 years. So sometimes they just want to shoot the shit. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do, is just be an ear and listen and things of that nature, right? But you have to be able to break that wall as much as we can. Some of that is literally breaking that wall. Some of that is getting people out. Some of that is maintaining connection. But we have to be able to break that wall, and it has to be sustained. So Black August is important, but Black August is a way to activate people to do more work. Black August is a way to get some of us who are already doing work to maybe like clarify things. That's why we study. That's why we train. That's why some of us fast, right? Like that's a way to get to gain more clarity. But that wall is the thing that we have to always be thinking about. How can we break it down? How can we break people out of those walls? How can we break those walls? Like I think that's our role on the outside. And sometimes that's directly in contact with the prisoner, with somebody locked up. Sometimes that is about letting other people know what's happening, because there's so much, like when people throw around words like fascism and stuff, I'm just like, it's like now fascism is here. And I'm like, have any of y'all ever heard about what happens inside prison? Because a lot of what people call fascism is, happens in prison all the time, like all the time. So it's like, a lot of this is like allowing people to know what's going on. Some of that is supporting family members that are related to people in prison, like helping them get to the prison, helping them stay afloat, being an ear, being a shoulder for them. Like, so there's different things that people can actively do. But I think the best way to kind of frame it again is like, how do we break down that wall? How can we actively put enough pressure on that wall, and how do we put enough pressure where they don't keep building those walls, right? So that's how I would frame that.
Thank you, brother. Brother Kinetik. Oh, yeah, Brother Kinetik.
Well, in Alabama, we've tried to build on that concept that the brother, we created an inside outside solidarity um, with some of the family members and loved ones of those incarcerated. And we created a communication tree to try to open up the lines of communication between people on the inside and outside, because a lot of our family members have been miseducated or have no knowledge about what really goes on. So I think one of the parts on the inside that we can play to aid and assist people and outside is begin to disseminate more information, to begin to educate people on the outside about what's actually going on, because that's the only way they can actually assist us in an effective way if they know what's going on and what kind of moves we're making. So when we make moves on the inside, we try to coordinate with the family members and loved ones of outside groups because, we can only say and do so much on the inside. But it's the people on the outside, the family members and loved ones who are organized and protest in conjunction with our labor strikes. It is the family members of people who are, marching to the Capitol and, putting our agenda on the table. You know, that's one of the most important things that we have in Alabama that I think is that, we have an understanding and a relationship with a lot of outside people about exactly what's going on inside of here and what they can do to help, what legislator needs to be lobbied against, and, what rallies we need to have. And, the things that, like I said, the people on the outside have become a microphone for us. We have an open line of communication that, this is what we have going on, this is what we're working on, and they amplify that. And I see the role of people on the outside is to be the mouthpiece and to be the arms and feet that we can't be. And the only way they can adequately do that is our part, and that is disseminating accurate information to our family members and loved ones, through letter writing. In Alabama, we've had a rare opportunity through the use of technology to be able to communicate, with people on the outside consistently. We've been able to, walk them through things going on and to get their understanding up to par. So when they're speaking to people and legislative governors or whoever, that they're speaking from a more informed position. So, that's what we advocate. One of the main things is, teach, 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 educate your children, educate your parents, educate your loved ones, about what the realities are, so that when the time comes for them to speak on our behalf, that they speaking from a position of strength, a position of power, a position of knowledge. So that's one of the main things that I think that people on the outside can do and should do, is begin to establish ties and links with as many people on the inside as you possibly can, so you can get a clear picture of what's going on and how you can be more effective in articulating the message. Because that's what we need more so than anything. Knowledgeable people out there that can articulate and advocate on our behalf from a position of knowledge.
Right on. Thank you, brother. And last but surely not least, Uncle Jamal.
There's some names in the chat and organizations. The Jericho movement's website is in the chat, and the names of political prisoners, writing, sending commissary, communicating with brothers and sisters on the inside about who needs to get some letters, because the people that don't get letters, they track that in the front office coming through the prison, and they know that if something happens, if they get vamped on, that nobody cares about them. So letting them know that people here on the outside, our youth theater program, Impact, goes inside the youth facilities and prisons to do shows, to uplift, to let people that know that they care. Families for Justice, founded by Sister activist attorney Sophia Elijah, works with the families. All of these are important. I was reminded on a call that I was on earlier that George Jackson made it clear, Brother Malcolm made it clear, that America means prison. That famous quote from his speech, "Don't be shocked when I said I was in prison. That's what America means, prison." And so the difference is that whether you're serving your time in maximum security or minimum security. So if we understand those family extensions and those resistance, that we have to be in a constant state of resistance in whatever way that we can do the best. This is the way to sustain, to grow, and to be victorious. And as Ho Chi Minh said, that when prison doors open, dragons fly out. So let us keep those bonds and sustain those dragons.
Shay. All right, we had time, and this is, I'm gonna just have to just call y'all individually to just break more bread because I know I'm inspired deeply, and I know folks on the call hope you're inspired. On behalf of myself and Asa, Black Men Build, just an immense gratitude to you brothers for your time today, for your ongoing commitment to the freedom of our people, including yourselves. In the chat, for those in the chat, show some love for our brother comrades in the chat, y'all. Just light the chat up for them. Um, I hope this conversation has moved, those who attended to action. If you haven't taken action yet, I hope this conversation has given folks a continued strength to continue to engage in our struggle for our liberation. I really hope so. And to kind of to all three of yours points, but to Two Black's point, art and cultural production should for a revolutionary purpose should move you to action. This is not spectacle. This is not for entertainment. Uh, this is for our freedom. This is for our brothers and sisters behind the wall. This is for our freedom, for our people outside. So continue to please support them. It's been a lot of information dropped in the chat. These brothers dropped an immense amount of bars and gems and wisdom. And don't let that be a waste, right? If you haven't taken action, you should be taking action. Um, I invite you all to join Black Men Build. Um, Somebody in Black Men Build can drop the link. But join Black Men Build if you haven't joined our organizational home, the Black Alliance for Peace. If you're in New York, uh, I don't know if volunteer, donate to Impact Repertory Theater. Support Brother Kinetik Justice's organization in Alabama and the organizing and the work they're doing. Um, it's an important labor strike history here. It's important labor history that he put y'all on game. And so this an immense amount of wisdom that has been shared with us today. Don't let it be wasteful. Um, and so with that, Asa, I didn't know if there's anything you wanted to say.
Just want to give another thanks to everybody on the panel. Thank you, Kinetik, Two Black, Elder Jamal Joseph, for hopping on here and being able to talk to folks. I'm just hoping that as we close out Black August, that folks have gotten something from the month, and as Two Black said, that folks can continue um, forward with whatever you got from the month and take it on into perpetuity as we continue to fight for our people, for our folks behind the wall, and continue to lift up their stories and the things that they're going through as we are out here doing the work that we're doing. So, man, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be of service, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank y'all.
Right on. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, yeah, free the land. Absolutely. I hope folks have a good night. As they used to say, stay black. I mean, I say stay black as in staying committed to struggle. It ain't just about a racial thing. But yeah, love y'all. Peace to y'all. And yeah, until next time.
Peace and blessings.